You're listening to Speaking Sidemount, the podcast where we talk all things sidemount diving, from equipment, skills, techniques, and sidemount diving expeditions to interviews with some of the world's top sidemount divers. Whether you're new to sidemount, been sidemount diving for years, or just want to know more, this is the place for all things sidemount. I'm your host, Steve Davis. Let's get wet. Hey, welcome back to Speaking Sidemount. I'm Steve Davis. My huge thanks to XDeep and the patrons of Speaking Sidemount for their support of the show. I'm sure that many of you are not familiar with Patreon or the concept of helping independent content creators such as myself by contributing via the Speaking Sidemount Patreon page. Developing content like this podcast takes a huge amount of time, effort, and money. Patreon allows you to contribute a small sum each month, which helps to compensate me for this effort and devote the time and resources to bring all of this to you. And so if you're listening, if you enjoy the show, if you learn something, become inspired, or just maybe it helps pass the time during the lockdown or later on a commute to work, then please consider helping and supporting the show by becoming a patron. It only takes a few dollars per month and it makes a huge difference. There are 3 reward tiers for patrons depending on the commitment you're able to make, with cool rewards such as early access to each episode, a monthly bonus content video, a monthly live session, and a Patron of the Month slot on the show where you get to be my guest to talk about your diving and answer any specific questions you may have. Thanks to all of those who've become patrons, especially to the VIP patrons, Dan Bonehill, Matteau Burden, Sean Weller, and Brendan Allen. If you want to know more about how you can support the show and the Patreon rewards, pop over to www.patreon.com/speakingsidemount and I'll have that link in the podcast notes. Now, one last thing, as a special incentive, if you become a patron of the show at the bonus content or VIP levels before April 30, 2020, I'll provide you with a complimentary copy of my ebook, Sidemount Fundamentals, which retails for $19.90 via my website. And so on with this episode. One of the really cool aspects of Speaking Sidemount is the global nature of my audience and also of my guests on the show. Being Sidemount focused, we tend to settle a lot of episodes on cave diving regions around the world, especially the Yucatan and Florida. However, we have been able to reach out to some lesser known areas. I hesitate to say Australia because they have a rich cave diving history and many great cave divers, but nonetheless, we've had Ryan Kachkowski, Chris Dawson, and Richard Harry Harris on from Oz. We've also covered Sri Lanka with DJ Jayawardena, Greece with Stratus Kass, Sardinia with Toddy, Canada with Peter Norris and Steve Lewis, Sweden with Mika Tullia, the Bahamas with Brian Kaycook and Christina Zanato, and of course the UK with Michael Thomas. And I'm sure I've missed plenty of others. So it was great to be able to add Belgium to this list when I caught up with David Debruyne of Outcast Explorers. David is a student of primo sidemount diver and instructor Garry Dallas and is now a sidemount Cave 1 and Cave 2 instructor with RAID. I long maintained that to be a good sidemount diver and instructor, you have to train with someone who really knows what they're doing, and Garry is that in spades. Now, David, with his buddies at Outcast Explorers, teaches sidemount and cave diving in Belgium and other parts of Europe, and we catch up and discuss his experiences training with Garry, how Outcast Explorers was formed, how he configures his sidemount equipment, about his diving and exploration of the mines of Belgium, and then we discuss sidemount rebreathers and the KISS Sidewinder. All this and much, much more in this episode of Speaking Sidemount. Welcome to Speaking Sidemount.
Thank you, Steve. I'm really honored for you having me here on your amazing podcast. I've been listening to it. I liked a lot of the interviews, especially the ones with Patrick Whitman and Steve Boers, Audrey Cudell,
Sure.
and also, not to forget, Ed Sorensen. I liked that a lot. And last but not least, my mentor, Garry Dallas, of course. And also the switching chairs with you and Audrey was nice.
Yeah, I enjoyed that. That was one of my favorites to do. I don't know if it's our best episode, but it was a lot of fun chatting with Audrey, and I think you and I know her pretty well, and she's an amazing lady and great diver and instructor, and so it was a lot of fun talking to her. And And also the contrast of accents, I think, was awesome. And you were talking to me off mic a little bit, apologizing for your English, but it's, again, I have such admiration for Europeans who speak many, many languages, and your English is just fine. So I think the contrast in accents is great, and it's a feature of Speaking Sidemount that we're a global podcast. So welcome to the show, mate. I'm really glad to have you here.
Thanks for having me, Steve.
So speaking of global, you and I were talking off mic a little about the current crisis with COVID-19, and just a message from both of us to all of you listening. We hope you're doing well. We hope you're doing okay. It's tough beyond words right now. And what I'm really loving is the way the world's populations are conducting themselves. All of the disaster movies have us going into panic and tearing each other up. And I think what we're doing about it right now is about as good as we can be expected to do. And I think one thing in the back of my mind is at least if you're stuck at home, you can fiddle with your side mount gear, right?
Yes, luckily.
So it gives us something to do. So let's do this. Can we start, David, by having you tell us a little bit about your background and how you got into diving?
I guess I started off in my childhood when my dad bought me some fins and a mask and a snorkel. And I think from that moment on, I was in the water and they could not get me out. Upon times, my mom started to worry as it was very hard to get me out of the water. I was floating hours on the water, facing my head down, admiring the aquatic life. And I was a big fan of the docu-series from Jacques Cousteau.
Yes.
I was such a big fan of that. I was watching all of them. As I'm a daydream believer, I dreamt of being on the adventure on board of the Calypso.
Like, I was exactly the same. I got given a plastic snorkeling kit when I was about 4 years old. Again, watching Jacques Cousteau's adventures in the 1970s was about when some of this was starting for me. And I used to dream of being Albert Falco and Bernard Delamont, exploring the underwater deep. I just loved every aspect of that. I thought it was amazing.
It was for sure. Actually, it put a big mark on me actually to continue diving. So that's where it started for me. But actually, what is weird, started to scuba dive when I was nearly 30 years old. I was snorkeling all the time, and I dreamt of going for scuba diving, but I never did it actually. Until I was nearly 30 years old, I got my first open water license. I got an introduction when I was 20 or something, but real scuba diving I started when I was nearly 30 years old. But from that moment on, it was diving all the way, I think. All vacations were chosen in perspective of scuba diving. Going to Egypt, Sharm el-Sheikh, Dahab, Curacao, Spain, Greece, even to Hawaii once, to Kona, to Italy, to Malta, Gozo, where I met Audrey and Tom. I was never trained by them, but I was admiring them for sure, actually. They were doing a really good job over there.
Yeah, I think you passed through Gozo while I was there, didn't you?
Might be. I was in Malta, but I went over there to Gozo, once.
Yeah, I had such an amazing time with them. And the same thing, I mean, it's just staggering how good divers they are and great people, and also their attitude to diving in terms of having a huge amount of fun, super relaxed, but also extremely safe and technically diligent, I think is how I describe that. Where did you do your open water course?
Nearly all of my courses I did in Belgium, just here. I was trained on the shores of the North Sea, on the quarries, and of course in the lakes we have over here. So open water up to instructor, I did all in Belgium, actually. I was maybe like the 0 to hero stuff, starting as an open water to instructor in a couple of years. So a lot of them did, actually. And I thought I was a real expert. It took me like a few more years to realize that I just started.
Yeah.
Anyway, I was working for this guy called Marco who had a diving center. And after a couple of years, I started our own club called Outcast Explorers. Maybe you think where the name comes from, because Outcast is not like a very obvious choice for a dive center. But we had some trouble with Marco, and he wanted to get rid of us for some reason. And so we said, you know what, we're going to start Outcast Divers, and that's where the name stuck.
I was going to ask you that question because I love that name. So that group formed after you left working with Marco. I mean, what do you guys get up to?
3 or 4 instructors working for Marco. We actually followed the course for instructor with Marco, and he promised us that we could do all the students. If we bring them in for open water, we could actually continue their education up to rescue diver. But as soon as we brought the open waters in, we did a couple of lessons, and then he took over. And after some time, we got a bit fed up with it and we started our own club. And that's the story, actually. That's it.
Yeah, sometimes you think there's a deep story and there's not.
Not a deep story, but anyway, it was actually, we were just in the pub and we were discussing what name are we going to take. And I was saying, hey, since we're Outcast, why not Outcast Divers? And then the name stuck and it stayed. And we were Outcast Divers. We became a club. We were straightforward. We wanted to do something different. And it took me up to 2010 before I started in Sidemount, because this was all back mount, recreational back mount. And in 2010, I was on this boat starting from Sharm el-Sheikh, going to the Tisselgorm. Maybe you've been diving the Tisselgorm as well?
I haven't. I dived Sharm, and sadly, the day that we were supposed to dive the Tisselgorm, the weather blew up and we couldn't go out. So I was very, very disappointed. So I'd love to hear more about it.
Okay. So we went for the Tisselgorm, and this guy actually was standing on the side with 2 tanks. He was actually a side mount diver, but it was the first time that I've seen one. And he jumps in the water. It was a bit clumsy. It was like a self-made rig. It was not so streamlined as you would think it would be. I was actually already fascinated by it, because I said, hey, that's a good idea. The 2 tanks on the side, and it's maybe handy to clip them off in the water to penetrate the wrecks. Just thinking. And then at the end, I had a little chat with him, and he said he had some training with a PADI instructor for side mount. And that was it, actually. And then it took me another 2 years before a guy in our club came up with side mount gear as well. And he was trained by Steve Martin. This was totally different setup. He was really streamlined. He was so good in the water. I said, oh my God, I want to try this now. Asked him, and he said, yeah, try my gear. And I did it on, and I felt comfortable from the first moment. He was maybe a little bit taller than me, but it was approximately the same conformation, and it put it on. I felt very comfortable in the water. I was balanced like I've never been before. And it was just the first try. I said, oh my God, this is amazing. I thought it was easy. That was a mistake as well. But anyway, I was thinking it was easy. So I continued to practice a few more dives. And then I made an appointment for my first course with a guy called Alain Dobelaar from INTD.
Yes.
And he gave me the basic side mount course. So I went for that course. After that, I've done a lot of dives, and I started with 2 steels, 10 liters to 30 bars, used some LU80s as well. Anyway, it worked out well, but I felt I need something more. I want more out of it, and training made me better for sure, but I wanted to have some more advanced tutoring. And so I was trying to get in touch with Steve Martin. But Steve Martin at that time was not available. I think he was in Australia at that time. I can't remember anymore, but he was somewhere in 2013. I was looking and I was looking and I was looking. And then at one point, I just was surfing the internet, and I hit this page with a guy called Garry Dallas, Simply Sidemount. And he had an attractive website. I just sent him a text or an email, and he replied. And I went to England and I did a 4 days course with him, a fundamental side mount course. That was an eye-opener for me, Steve. It was like, oh my God, it was totally different. I said, okay, I'm going to get as good as this guy trained by Steve Martin. Coming back, from that moment on, I was side mount diving only, actually. The back mount gear was only actually collecting dust in my shed, and I was diving side mount from that very moment up to now, actually. I'm still diving side mount, caves. I'm obsessed with side mount, I think. Maybe that's a bit wrong.
You're in good company here. So tell us a bit about your experience training with Garry the first time around.
The first day we arrived and he was showing us the finning techniques. I already learned a little bit about frog kick, back kick, and helicopter turn, but he fine-tuned it. So he did a really good job. He started on the surface. That's his thing, actually, to start on the surface with the back kick. The holy grail of kicks, he called it.
Yes.
It is, actually. And then we went through the whole schedule. And if I look to the essentials of Steve Martin, I see a lot of similarities in it. There are some different approaches, but many of them are the same, I think. Once you have found the correct procedures, I think it's maybe logical that if you're a good instructor, that you will have a lot of similarities in your courses with side mount. But the big difference, I think, with him is he has endless patience. This guy has patience. It's amazing. And he has a solution for every small problem. Some of them actually are really weird. Like this one guy could not clear out his mask, but he was a smoker. And then he was letting him smoke through his nose And it worked. This guy actually, he struggled with clearing out his mask for years. And with the exercise of smoking through his nose, it worked. I don't know why, but it worked.
Who knew there was a use for smoking, eh?
Yeah. I don't smoke, actually. And
Good.
But that guy did. Yeah, he is finding all these little things to solve problems. It's like it's an encyclopedia, I think, sometimes. And then finally, after the course, he fine-tuned everything, showing us, of course, flutter breathing and, the score with side mount, all these techniques. And then at the end, I don't know if Steve Martin does that, but Garry does. He has this scenario 4. Ever heard of that, the scenario 4?
I have not, but please share.
Should I do that, actually? Maybe I'm going to get into trouble. It's a critical skill scenario. I think Tom Steiner does it as well, actually. It's actually just everything that can go wrong will go wrong. It's a bit of Murphy's Law. Depending on the student, you can go a little further or you have to stop. Some stuff you can't do. The thing is, you have to solve the problems. And it's not like he's going to press that button of the rag in your mouth and then you have to free flow your left or your right. And you have to identify if it's the left or the right cylinder. But everything can go wrong. Also, the other one can free flow. Your mask can get ripped off. Your fin can come off. Your tank can be unclipped. Maybe you have to donate air, and then your own regulator starts to free flow, stuff like that. I'm not saying that he did that, but...
Yeah, I do a similar thing on my courses, and you base it on the student and where they've progressed to, and obviously the standards for the course don't necessarily rely upon them being able to deal with that, but being able to deal with pressure underwater and multiple failure scenarios. While it's not very realistic, I guess it's possible that you could have a couple of failures. What is important is that, number one, that you can clear your mind and be really clear about what it is that you need to do. And then number two is the knowledge of in what order do I solve things. If you've got a mask flood and you've got a gas issue and you've got a fin off, what order do I solve that in? And sometimes that overwhelms people. And I guess you and I can share that the number one most important thing is, can I breathe? And so solving that problem first is really good. For me, number two is, do I have control of my buoyancy? So making sure that if there's any issue surrounding buoyancy control, that's secondary to that. And then number three, you can start to think about, can I see, and so on, thinking about teammates as well if you've got a gas sharing scenario or if you've got other teammates around. Very cool. I love that. You've gone on with Garry and you're now a RAID side mount Cave 1 and Cave 2 instructor. Can you share a little about your ongoing training with Garry and then how you teach side mount and cave diving now?
My learning didn't stop with Garry alone. Actually, he taught me a lot, and I actually absorbed a lot as well because, he's one top shelf instructor for sure, and there are some others as well, like Tom Steiner, Steve Martin, like yourself, Audrey as well. I've seen her teaching some students with the Intro to Cave, which I assisted, actually, just as a spectator, to be honest. But anyway, I've seen her doing that Intro to Cave with a guy from Switzerland. So I got actually my side mount instructor because of the training with Garry. I adopted most of Garry's teaching into my teaching. But of course, every instructor has his own little things, and 90% is about what Garry does, I try to do. That's basically it, actually. And I try to learn from everybody, even from students, actually. Sometimes I see stuff and I think, oh my God, this is really interesting. I'm going to apply that into my teaching. Sometimes I see a back mount diver doing some stuff for a technical guy from GUE, and then I pick up some stuff from that guy. Maybe small things. Like Garry is not a big fan of the thing from Razer, the breakaway clip, but I like it. Do you like it as well? I love it.
Yeah, I started to use it for a while. I took it to Florida with me. Ed Sorensen hated it. And there's a reason for that. I think the people who don't like it, what can happen with that Razer clip is that it can hang a little low. And so having it swinging around, hanging a little low because of the length of the clip and how it attaches can be a bit of a problem. Having said that, what I do love about it is, especially for training, if you want to be able to break that away time and time again and make sure that people understand how the breakaway systems work, then it's really, really good for training. I've said it a couple of times. I'm actually using a toddy clip now, which is a little bizarre because it's quite different from the breakaway, but I really like it because with my Sidewinder, it sits very close to my chest. In that scenario, it's right there and it doesn't come away at any distance other than the second stage. So there's a lot of different ways to do that. For those who don't like it, I can understand why they don't. But equally, I know why I like it as well. And as I said, the fact that it can break away and be easily clipped back on again is an excellent function. Really good in training. You've learned from Garry, and I agree with you. You've learned with one of the best. You follow a lot of his scenarios, but you mentioned that you put some of your own things in there, and I love that as well. I think, as you said, you can learn a lot from everybody, and I treat the world like a smorgasbord or a buffet, and I grab bits and pieces just like you do. But you end up making everything your own. Tell us about some of the specific things that you do that are maybe a little different.
What I do different is like Garry, when he builds up his scenarios, and then he ends up with that scenario 4, because he does it in a 4-day training period. So he has to box everything into 4 days. I have the luxury to do it in a long period of time. Sometimes my students stay with me like for 1 month. I'm not going to train them every day, but I train them like 2 long days. And then I let them practice. That makes my next 2 days a lot more easy if they practice. If they don't practice, I can start all over. That's my problem. That's one thing I do. And I think it's very rewarding that they got the time, actually, like a couple of weeks to train. And at the end, I think it gives much better results. That's actually the main thing. I focus on that because I can do it in 4 days, boxing it in as well. And it works also. It's not that it's like a really huge difference, but there is a difference. And I think at the end of the 4-day course that I split up in 2 days and have a break for a couple of weeks, and I emphasize that they have to train as much as possible. And I check on them like every 3-4 days. I send them, did you do this? Did you do that? And then I get them going. And then after a couple of weeks, they come back and we start again. We do a little repeat of what we did in the 2 days, and then we go on. And it goes really smooth, actually. Most of the time, it goes really smooth. And I think it gives better result this way.
Tend to agree with that. Certainly, I don't have the luxury of that just based on the logistics of dive sites and so on here. But I agree that is a fantastic way to train. And I think it's great to be able to sort of get some instruction and learn the right way to do things and then go away and practice doing things right. And sort of reminds me a little bit of the cave diving group in the UK where they train over a period of a year. And you're being mentored and guided along. And there's a lot to that. I have a couple of students here who really struggled to reach the standard of both the standard Sidemount course or my fundamentals course and my tech course. And so they've been just ongoing diving and ongoing practicing. And then at some point we'll catch up again, see what they've achieved and try and continue their development as divers. And that's really what we're trying to do, isn't it? We're trying to develop divers. And so having some time to practice, I think, is awesome. And 4 days can be too short for sure.
Yeah, that's what I think. For some, it will work in 4 days, but most of them, 4 days is like really short, I think. Unless if you are a natural. But you cannot do everything in 4 days. If you actually focus on the skills and you do long days, 4 days, I think, of course, you make them better divers for sure. There is no doubt about that. Actually, one of my students, I trained him into Sidemount, and then he went to Audrey. Audrey is like, can be really critical. You know her.
Yes,
Sometimes
I do.
It's really sweet, and then but sometimes she can be really harsh as well. But yeah, that's her, actually. I love her for that, but that's what she is. One of my students went to her. She made like a few more tweaks to his equipment that she adjusted to get it better. But at the end, she said he was really well trained and it's a really awesome diver. And anyway, she praised him. So that was nice for me as well, actually, I think.
I think there's no higher praise, is there? As instructors, we're a function of our students as well, aren't we? And they're the product of what we do. And so that congratulations, because I know Audrey is tough and she can be critical, but it comes from a good heart and it comes from a place of wanting to help people be better divers. And she certainly has her way of doing things. She's very good at tweaking units and getting them optimized. So the relationship between Sidemount and cave diving is always really interesting. So when you've trained someone in Sidemount and then you look to take them onto cave training, what are you looking for and how do you manage that process of moving them into becoming a cave diver?
For starting, I have the luxury that we have a dive club. I try to get as many people as I can interested into Sidemount diving because it has a lot of advantages. Maybe it's said 1,000 times, but of course the safety... that's a very obvious plus. It's versatile. You can use it everywhere. Actually, I can use Sidemount everywhere, up to like 4 tanks, like said before, by many other instructors. The only problem is, of course, when you go on a boat and it's rough sea, especially on the North Sea charters. So a lot of the boats have like stairs on the side. And with Sidemount, it can be like a challenge to get in and out of the water. Of course, there are solutions, but some of the captains, they don't want to work with that. they're used to the back mount divers and they really don't want side mount divers. They want them on the boat, but they have to take care of their own business.
Mm-hmm.
That can be like a challenge. I think if you're trained properly, you can do it. Not a big problem, but if you're not trained properly, it gives some issues. Like last time I was with a couple of divers on the North Sea. The captain was, oh my God, some side mount divers on the boat. But we came with our team on the boat. We were quicker in the water than the back mount divers. We were quicker out. And we used the rope like Steve Martin shows in his videos. Yes. It worked.
With a Prusik loop?
Yeah. Prusik loop, and they were all watching us. And then at the end, the captain came to us and he said, oh my God, that is side mount diving. So he liked it. They were talking about it on the way back for a couple of hours. Anyway, I think they were impressed. So it works in many circumstances. You have to be trained properly. You have to be used to your equipment, especially if you do challenging dives in the North Sea. So I'm a big fan of side mount diving, and a lot of the guys I train never go back actually either. Must be good.
Yeah, you raised a really good point there, which I hadn't thought of too much before, which is if you're working on a boat in tough conditions, and especially if there is a team of you, there isn't any reason why you need to put load on the boat crew, is there? I mean, as a team, you can assist each other. I mean, it's one thing we do in Gozo a lot is you're assisting each other in and out of the water, even for shore diving. So I think that's a thing that you can do, right, where you manage yourself in and out of the water as a team. And that can be extremely smooth and zero load on the boat crew.
Yeah, it is. Exactly. That's what I mean. But you have a lot of experience as well, in
boat diving. Yeah, our conditions are relatively benign. Occasionally it gets a little rough, but it's not North Sea, right? So at least where we're diving. So while I have the skills and experience in how to do it, I don't have either the need or the opportunity to get in and out of the water in tough conditions very often. So we're doing a lot of boat diving. In fact, 99% of our diving is boat diving. Then some of it's on ribs, some of it's on charter boats. So there's a variety of different methods. Just for those people, again, we've been talking about this a lot recently, but I highly recommend Thomas Mishura's Double Ender series that he put on last year. I think that's a fantastic series in terms of managing side mount gear individually in and out of the water. So well worth looking at. You talked side mount and you talked about your encouraging people in your club for side mount diving. How does that then go into cave diving?
Because all of my students, they know that I'm interested in cave diving. And cave diving, it started actually just a little bit after I got my course with Garry. I already started with a cavern course and I did some local mines. And I went on to do some small caves in Belgium and went on to Spain and France. So they know I'm into cave diving. I finally did my Cave 2 course with Garry Dallas in Spain, the same place you've been to.
Yeah, Cueva del Agua.
I love it as well. I still love it actually because I have like 30 dives in Cueva del Agua. We trained also in Moray. Have you done Moray as well? Yeah?
No, I have not.
It's in Spain as well, actually. It's in Spain, the Moray Cave. It's about 2-hour drive from Cueva del Agua. It's a bit a different cave, but I loved it as well. It's easier. There is more flow in that cave, but the visibility is better, and there is not a lot of sediment like you have in Isla Plana in Cueva del Agua.
Yeah. Well, that's the benefit of flow, right, as all the sediment washes out. Cave del Agua, for those people who haven't dived it, it's a very, very interesting cave. It's a thermal cave because there's some geothermal activity there. So the water is extremely warm, 29, 30 Celsius. Which is interesting, but it has absolutely zero flow and a massive amount of silt. And so it's a very challenging cave from the point of view of not messing up some of the passages as you move through. Teaches you a lot, doesn't it?
It does actually, because we've done a lot of exercises in zero vis. The lost line is really a lost line over there.
It is. If you mess it up one day, it's going to stay with you for the rest of the course. So you got to be on your game in terms of your finning technique, don't you?
Yeah, that's really important. A lot of my students, they're interested in cave diving. If you're a side mount diver, many of them have interests in wreck or cave. And since they know that I'm really big into caves, I love wrecks as well. They're always asking, can you take us for an initiation? Just a teaser for a little mine. Every year I do one teaser. I take them to a really easy mine. And then actually 90% of the students, they want to do the Cave 1 course. And of course, Sidemount and cave, it's like a match made in heaven. So
it is hand in
works
glove,
really
isn't it?
well. It works really well, actually, especially in our Belgian caves, because a lot of them have very narrow entrances. And with back mount, most of them are impossible to get into because they have really small entrances. If we speak about restrictions, we have some caves who have pretty small restrictions, which is impossible for back mount to get in.
You're based in Belgium, and apart from JVD or Jean-Claude Van Damme, I don't know a lot about Belgium, which is a bit sad. So can you tell us a bit about your diving there? And you just mentioned the caves. I'd love to learn more about them.
Okay. In Belgium, we have a lot of caves, but most of the caves are dry caves. That's why we became member of the Belgian Speleo Club. We got actually the permission to get into the caves, but this is not always easy. Some of them are locked with fences and with the gates. And so you need a key to get in. You need proper insurance. You need proper approval. So you need a permit to get in, basically. That's what it is. About cave diving in Belgium, we don't have so many caves in Belgium. We have a few. Some of them you can dive, but most of them are small. Not in depth, some of them going to 90 meters, but most of them don't have a big distance, narrow entrance. So it's actually challenging. It's not like for a guy who just finished his full cave course and then goes into that small, narrow caves. It's maybe not the first thing you do.
Right.
But what we do have in Belgium is mines. We have mines. Yeah. Oh, my God. I think we have lots of them. We have so many mines. Some of them are controlled by the Belgian Speleo Club, and some of them are actually long forgotten somewhere. Actually, there are so many mines going from bluestone mines, slate mines, red marble, and then the famous black marble from Mazie. So those mines, I think some of the stones were dug out. Maybe I'm lying, actually. I don't know if that's true. But actually, they told me that the black marble was used by Napoleon in France. I don't know if that's true or not. But if they're lying, I'm not lying.
It sounds right to me.
So there are many of that. And there's a phosphate mine. Oh, my God, that's the most beautiful of them all. They say it has the longest tunnels in Europe. Rumors go that it goes like 300 kilometers. If that's true, I don't know, but I've been diving it. Indeed, the tunnels keep on going, actually. They are large. The water is crystal clear. The temperature of the water is like a few degrees warmer than the other mines we have. I'm not going to say it's warm. It's like 10 degrees, the phosphate mine, and the others are like 6, 7 degrees.
Yeah, 10's not too bad, though, is it?
It's not too bad.
6 or 7 starting to get into dry glove land there, aren't you?
We use dry gloves, sometimes heating and stuff. But the mine in Malonje, the big phosphate mine, for me, up to now, it's the most beautiful mine we have in Belgium. But unfortunately, it's forbidden to dive there now because of the danger of collapse. There was a collapse the size of 2 football fields a few years back. Last time I've been diving there, like we have seen a chunk coming out of the ceiling the size of a small car. It's like there was no vis, but we found the line and we went out, and that's it, actually. So mines, we have enough in Belgium, Steve. There's no problem with that. So a lot of training opportunities, a lot of exploring. Most of the mines are explored in Belgium, but we are looking always for that hidden pearl to find a mine that has no lines in it. We found one just a couple of weeks ago, and we put 200 meters of line in it, and we were happy like small children. And then one of our team just found a mine just across the border in the French region. And it's also a virgin mine. I mean, there were no lines in it, and he put a few hundred meters line in it as well. So our team, Outcast Explorers, because that was the name, are trying to find mines who are not explored yet. We love that.
Sounds brilliant.
Like there is no week going by or we're actually looking or searching or trying to dive one of those mines. That's what we do. Yeah. Of course, if you have a lot of action going on, it attracts people and they want to be part of it. I have to thank also, because I'm a member of the Science Explorers, which is a Speleo club in Belgium. And they have a really awesome team leader, Eric Waters. I don't know if you've heard of him. He's also involved in some exploration, and this guy actually is awesome as well. So he showed us a few of the locations, and he helped us actually on our way. So big praise to him as well. I have to mention that, I think.
Well, and the connection between dry caving and the Speleo groups and cave diving is obviously very, very strong, isn't it?
It is, actually, it is. In dry caving, I'm just like the greenhorn. I try to learn as much as possible. Actually, I've seen a video of you actually getting up.
Oh, yeah, it was basically part of a single ropes technique course I did in Mount Gambier in Australia, where we came out of Baker's Cave. It's a man-made hole in the ground, manhole on top of it, and they've built a pipe that goes into a cave, but the only way to go in or out is vertical access. So it's an ideal training site for your ropes course. We made a few mistakes on that one, so I'm trying to single rope out of a hole with all of my gear on. Not cylinders, but everything except that. But I still had to haul up about 20 kilos, so it wasn't a lot of fun, and probably could have done it a lot more efficiently if I wasn't so green at it myself. So I got lots of good tips after people watched that video, but it was a lot of fun. I really enjoyed it.
I've seen that video, actually. Yeah, you were getting up into a tube, or what was it again?
Yeah, it's a concrete tube. I don't even know what you would call it, but there's a manhole on top of it, and it's certainly man-made, and it's a tube that goes into a cave that's on a piece of farmland, and quite a nice cave in terms of the dive. But the main aspect of that particular dive was training for single ropes technique, and we'd been practicing that, and so that was me getting out. I have to say I was carrying some pretty bad injuries at that time too. Both of my shoulders were not great, so as I said, it wasn't the most fun experience in terms of climbing out, but I'm really glad I did it. It was super cool to learn some single rope technique and put it into practice.
Yeah, that's awesome, actually, yeah. That's what we love as well. Cave diving, dry caving a little bit, because we need it, actually. Sometimes we need some dry caving to get through the place where we have to dive, of course, because we're doing some diving, which is interesting. Have you been diving in France, in the Lot and the Dordogne region?
No, I haven't dived France at all. My European diving's been Gozo, Spain, and then I was in Sardinia last year, and I did do some dry caving there with Toddy and his team, and that was amazing. But that was very, very simple stuff. I mean, a lot of fun. Dive an hour into a cave and then get out of the water, put your gear down and go and walk through effectively and swim through some amazing dry cave systems. And I've done a little bit of that in Australia in Mount Gambier at Engelbrecht Cave as well, but none in France. So I'd love to hear more.
Yeah, you have to do that, actually. That's cave country, I think. You have so many caves over there in like a small region. The visibility in the water is normally pretty good, actually, depending on the cave, but most of them have good visibility. They're washed out, so you don't have the problems like you have in Cueva del Agua. They're all tunnel shapes, nothing compared to Cueva del Agua. But if I can be honest, Cueva del Agua is like, yeah, that's still my cave. Cueva del Agua is like, it's awesome. Especially the shape of the cave and the colors of the cave, they start to change the deeper you go. We went up to the 850 meter mark where you have that hole that goes into the other system. And up from 500 meter to 600 meter, you see like the shape of the cave is changing. It's always something new. It's like it attracts you actually to go further and further. I wanted to penetrate that hole at 850 meters last time, but Garry convinced me to do that cave instructor course. So I was occupied 14 days into that cave instructor course from morning till evening. And he promised me to give me 2 days off, but at the end, probably enough to do it in 2 days less. I needed it 2 other days. So.
Yeah, I understand. To be honest, I haven't gone very far into Cave del Agua at all because I was just there for my full cave training. So we were very much training in there the whole time. I can't even remember how far we got, but it wasn't very far at all. So yeah, there's another dive to come back to for sure.
We have to do that together, Steve.
Love to.
And the thing is, like, I'm not a big fan actually for pushing the cave straight on from the first 2 dives. We actually gradually have to build it up. That's my feeling, especially into 100%. Cave diving, to gradually build up. Tom Steiner once told me about the tree, and you have to actually see all the branches. And in the beginning, I was a bit confused what he was saying, but now I realize what he was actually trying to tell me. It is actually important to know every aspect of the cave and gradually build your confidence, your own confidence as well, because that's needed. It's not only like knowing your way in the cave, it's also to get over the distance stress and the time stress and
gas stress. Yeah, exactly. And that's one of Ed Sorensen's great sayings: time stress, distance stress, gas stress. Of course, he's leading into why rebreathers are great for caves. It's interesting how all of the great cave instructors that I know, and a lot of them I've spoken to on Speaking Sidemount, they all talk about learning the cave. And what Tom's saying with learning the branches on the tree is exactly that. It's learning the cave. I remember Natalie Gibb talking about that as well, about understanding how a cave goes and how it's formed, and many others. It's so important to know where you're going and to, under stress, be able to find your way out again. And I think one great thing I think about people who do cave training with the right instructors is any overconfidence is generally beaten out of you, and you really make sure that you take care of yourself and your team and that you dive the cave correctly. And your strategy of taking time and learning the cave is exactly the right way to go. And that's how you get to be an old cave diver, right?
Yeah, that's what we want to be. I'm not going to be a young cave diver anymore because my age is already there. But I mean, I know exactly what you mean. It is really important actually to build up your confidence and not actually push yourself into a dangerous position actually where you can't make it out of the cave, and it happens. So I've seen actually guys who are fully trained and they think they can do everything. That's not the way it works, I think. You have to be like really precise, and you have to think about everything. You have to be memorizing stuff, which is also more difficult at my age. But actually, you have to do it. You have to do it.
Yeah, I'm with you. Yeah, I've done a reasonable amount of cave diving now, but the trouble for me is that I don't get to cave dive every week or every month even. And so I might cave dive a few times a year. The thing for me is that I am far from a cave diving expert, even though I'm fully qualified. And so what I am always very mindful of is that every time I enter this environment, I have to build my comfort level back to where I was last time. And so that obviously limits my diving. It means I'm not going to be doing some things that perhaps someone of my experience level might normally do. But that's okay. You've got to do that if you want to make sure that you maintain your safety and the safety of those around you. We're absolutely on the same page there, my friend. Awesome.
Yes.
So now I know you dive X-deep mainly in freshwater, I'm assuming, in caves and mines, and it looks like you're using 12-litre cylinders. Can you talk a little bit about how you've configured your side mount equipment? I think it's really important to a lot of the people who are listening, this thing of setup and configuration.
First, I make the harness correct, fitting my shoulders and my waist, and my crotch strap short enough that it actually pulls my waist strap in a curve down a little bit more downwards to my crotch. I use my own made sliding D-rings, which is actually just a half a D-ring on a tri-glide that I actually I bend it a little bit and it slides. The way you bend it, actually, it slides more or less, and it works really well for me since 2012 up to now. I don't use the rubber rings. I hope Patrick doesn't hear me, but
I'm hoping Patrick's used to that now. I don't think many people do use them. Yeah, he uses them everywhere, which is fantastic. But
I have nothing against it because they have their use as well, actually. But for me, it works really good, that stuff. I've seen manufacturers making sliding D-rings, like the guy from Sump UK in England, Andy it is.
Yes.
Yeah. I bought them, I tried them, they worked as well, but I don't think they were better than the ones I had, which are really cheap, the Tri-Glide, and just bending it with a half a D-ring on it. And it works really well, actually, perfectly for the alloy cylinders. If I use the 12-liter steels, I just pick the D-ring at the end, actually.
Yeah.
I don't know how you do it, but that's the way I do it.
Yeah, for me, I find sliding D-rings so interesting. The only ones that I've found to work for me 100% of the time are the ones that Tom Steiner gave me, which were effectively a buckle that you open and close, and you open it and slide it. To me, they're fantastic. And the only downside of those is they take up a bit of space, but it's not space you're using for anything else. So they work 100% of the time. That's what I prefer to use. They're not very commonly available. Pretty sure you can get them from Tom and Audrey, and I think Techline have made a copy of them, but they're the ones to me that are the best, and I use them all the time. And it is quite funny with steels. The steels that I use in New Zealand here are actually super heavy. They're 14.1 kilos. However, they do get buoyant when they get below about 80 bar.
Oh.
Yeah, which is quite strange. And every steel has its own characteristics, and it's important that you know that not every steel cylinder is the same. In fact, I had one the other day diving a wetsuit. I had it down to 40 bar. That was both cylinders, obviously. And it was very buoyant. I had it almost as far around as I would have an aluminium cylinder. Not all steel cylinders are built the same, and it's important to understand your cylinder and what its buoyancy characteristics are. And sliding D-rings for any cylinder, be it aluminium or steel, that becomes buoyant. Sliding D-rings are your friend. You can use 2 fixed points. A lot of divers do that, and I think that's fine. What I love is just the ability to be able to infinitely adjust it both forwards and backwards. Every time I do a rig switch, I check my cylinders to make sure they're trim. because, again, I feel it's a sign of a good side mount diver when your cylinders are set up correctly all the time, and so I try and do that.
That's what I do as well, actually, yeah.
I'm intrigued by your setup, though. Maybe I'll get you to send me a picture of it.
It's very easy to make. It's actually something Garry showed me in 2013. I still use it. It works really well. You can find it everywhere. You just need a few pliers. You bend it, you slide it, and it works. Or it doesn't work, then you have to bend it a little bit more. If it slides too hard, you have to bend it back. If you find the correct position, it works really well, actually. You don't have to do anything anymore. It slides when it has to slide, and you correct the trim of your cylinders every time you switch regs, which I do as well. And I put 2 extra D-rings at the back, but that's for my steels because I use Euro cylinders and they don't tend to float so much as the ones you were mentioning. Sure. If I use the 200 bar Fabers, which are actually getting buoyant at the tail end, just put them onto my sliding D-rings actually because I have no other choice.
Yeah, and I should mention the cylinder that I was referring to as a Faber, but there was an interesting weight on it that was quite a bit heavier than the other Faber 12 litres that I've seen. So it's actually a 12.2 litre. So it's a little bit bigger.
Never heard of that.
It's interesting. And New Zealand is such a strange place for cylinders. We have such a limited supply and everything's very regulated by the government. So it's very tough to get cylinders here. So we get 11-litre aluminiums or the LE80s. We get 12-litre steels. Occasionally you'll get these 12.2s turn up. We get 15 litres. But boy, you try and find a 7-litre cylinder or a 2-litre steel. They are just so tough to find because we have to bring them in large batches and we're such a small market. One of my big bugbears here is finding cylinders, but I managed to ferret around it. It's about being able to find cylinders even when they're in short supply.
But what do you dive then? You dive alus?
No, I dive steels. So in New Zealand, the water temperatures here range from, in the summer, it's about 21 Celsius, which is kind of where it is right now. And that lasts well into the autumn or fall. And then in the winter, it falls down. In the north here, it probably only goes down to about 15 or 16 Celsius. But it's still cold enough to be on that cusp of wetsuit versus dry suit. And given that I'm technical diving most of the time, or at least I'm either doing it or I'm training for it, then I dive dry suit all year round. And then it's just what are the thickness of my undergarments. So my weapon of choice here with a dry suit saltwater is steels. And I'm diving these 14.1 kilo, 12.2 litre cylinders with a dry suit sliding D-rings. That works great for me if I go to the tropics. So if we're heading for Truck Lagoon or one of the other Pacific Islands, then the cylinders that are available there are your 11-litre aluminiums or LE80s. And then the sliding D-rings are super important. I don't change too much on my harness. It stays pretty much the same. I might set up the cylinder slightly differently in terms of where the clip's located. But that's really the only change that I'm making. And I'm doing a checkout dive to see how they work. But generally, I'll get the LEs to work straight away. I would dive aluminium in New Zealand. They're quite fun if you need to take them off because they behave much better than steels do if you need to remove a cylinder. But the problem then becomes you have to wear so much more weight with aluminium cylinders in salt water in a dry suit that I'm starting to overload the XD Stealth 2.0 Tech, which I can fit 8 kilos, and I'm starting to sort of want 8 and more. And so it's not that much fun trying to load all of the weight onto yourself when you can carry it in the cylinders. I do love watching guys like Monsieur playing with LE cylinders, and they're wonderful to play with when you have to take one off. And it's not so much fun if you take a steel off and it's part of your weighting system. So you do have to think about your dive plans and do I have to remove a cylinder? And if so, is it staying with me? And those sort of things. Certainly any deco cylinders are always aluminium or stage cylinders. But in terms of my standard cylinder setup, I'm diving 12-litre, 12.2 litre steels.
I dive both steels and alus, actually. It depends on what I do. If I go in freshwater, most of the time I dive the alus. But on the North Sea, I try steels. So it all depends on the situation, actually, what we do.
You're raising a good point. It's really important to be able to dive, I don't want to say any cylinder type, but certainly you should, as a trained side mount diver, be able to move very smoothly between 12-litre steel and a 11-litre aluminium. So that's an LE80, and I think 12 litres is 95 cubic feet in steels. So whatever the standard is, you should be able to move easily between those. Now, can you go to a smaller steel or a different size steel? Then you need to adjust your setup again. And I always write down what I do. When I spoke to Sandra Klopp, one of the things I loved about what she said was she's got this table or spreadsheet where every possible configuration that she dives, from ice diving all the way through to warm water cave diving, she's writing down what happens. And I think that's a really good thing to do, because the next time you go back to it, all you have to do is refer to your documents, whatever it is, and you can see what your configuration should be. And she's marking her harness as well, which again is another great thing to do in terms of changing the fit for wet to dry and changing the setup from different types of cylinders. So it's a very smart thing to do.
Yeah, it is for sure, actually. I didn't do that, but what I do is actually write my weights and everything with the different kind of cylinders I use. I only have alus, 80s, the 12-liter steels. Sometimes I use 7-liter alus because it's like a real small penetration. I can't even take the 80s with me. And it's a small cave, but it's just a narrow passage. And then I go with smaller cylinders. And that's about it. 3 different type of cylinders. So 12-liter steels, 232 bar from a Euro cylinder. I have the 80s, the 2 times 80s, and then the 2 times 7 liters. And that's it, actually. That's what I do. Most of the time, I use alu 80s for my stages as well, as you do. Because that's the obvious choice. Otherwise, your stealth will not lift you anymore.
No, and you're going to become mega heavy, and also taking them off is going to become a problem. Yeah, that's right. Aluminium, absolutely, for stage and deco cylinders, and they then become quite easy to manage in terms of donning, doffing, and in terms of managing your weight system. They're not a problem. I'm about to start diving 7-liter or 50 cubic feet steels with the Sidewinder, so I actually can't wait for that, because I'm building hours and experience, and most of the diving, I definitely do not need 2 12-liter steels with that amount of gases, bailout and diluent. And so I'm looking forward to getting these smaller steels, which will be much easier to handle while I build my experience, especially boat diving again, where trying to get on and off with a rebreather on, as well as a couple of big steels, has been a little bit of a challenge. I'm getting better and better, of course, but yeah, I'm looking forward to that, and that should be in the next few weeks.
And you love the Sidewinder as well? Because I've only tried the Liberty, so I don't know.
We've covered it so many times on here, it's not funny now. And that's going to continue because, hey, it's what I'm diving. But it's a beautiful unit. It's super easy to use. It's manual, but it has an orifice, which means that your metabolic rate of O2 is being delivered to you. You know, a lot of the concerns that you might have around it being completely manual are not really there. The first rule of rebreather diving is know your PPO2 and manage that. And again, it's very easy to do that. If you're not changing levels, it pretty much stays the same. And then if you're ascending or descending, you have to pay attention and manage it. But I'm still learning, to be honest. There are times when I think, gee, I wish I could just go back to open circuit and relax completely here now, because I don't have to think about that very much. But having said that, every dive gets a little better, and I just have to put the work in and put the hours in like everyone else does. I just can't wait to be starting to use it in some deeper diving and in some cave diving, but I need to do another 50, 100 dives to get myself to a level that I am comfortable with, and then that'll be the next steps for me, is cave CCR and trimix. And so I'm super looking forward to that, because it's a beautiful unit to dive.
That's amazing, yeah. I'm interested. I'm going to try it. I only tried the Liberty, and I loved it as well. But
again, I've said it before, but the beauty of it is that what you'll do is you'll just take your complete side mount system as you have it now, and then the Sidewinder just sits on top of that. So the only additions you need is some attachment points for the cans and an attachment for your O2 cylinder, and you're away. Everything else stays the same. You're donning your side mount cylinders in the same way. Your left cylinder becomes your bailout, your right cylinder becomes your offboard dill. So from that perspective, as a long-time side mount diver, it's really enjoyable to go to rebreather diving. And the other thing that you find is that you trim out very quickly for that reason, and your stability is there straight away. You're not fighting the unit. I kind of find most of the back mount guys, their trim is not. In fact, some of the units want you to be in a head-up trim because they breathe better that way. And as Sandra and I talked about, the work of breathing on the Sidewinder is extremely good in terms of rebreathers. It's just a beautiful unit from that point of view, and so simple. There's nothing that can really go wrong. You've got O2 cells, and you've got your Fisher connection to whatever computer you're using, but that's it. It's just a very basic but very well thought through and a great unit to dive. I highly recommend it.
I'm very interested in that. And is it breathing easily when you're in horizontal profile? Yeah.
Horizontal, absolutely. The only place it doesn't breathe amazingly is 100% vertical. So, and the only time I experienced that, obviously, if you have to go sometimes in shipwrecks going up through hatches, but it's a very short period of time and you can deal with it. Then the other time I've noticed it is just getting in the water and being vertical in the water just before you descend, which again, you don't need to be there for very long. on the loop at least. Any sort of vaguely horizontal position, it breathes fantastic. And then, of course, if you have to go through some little small spaces, you're already in your side mount configuration. So you can go through anything you can in side mount. Both your bailout and your offboard dill are available to remove and push in front of you. So it's exactly what you're used to side mount diving.
And how big is the scrubber?
The scrubber is it's 6.4 pounds in 2 scrubbers, 2.8 kilos, I think that is. So it's got about as much scrubber material as a lot of the back mount units do.
That is nice.
It's a good 6 hours on there. I've spoken to those who've taken it much longer than 6 hours with no issues whatsoever. At the moment, I'm changing about every 3 or 4 because, as I said, I'm a newbie and I'm being very careful. But I don't think there's any great requirement for that, depending on how hard you're working and the water temperature and all those sort of things. So be conservative and follow your instructor's guidance if you're looking at using one. And the other thing I've found is having the dual scrubber system. If you do get any moisture on the exhale side, I've yet to find that travel through to the inhale side. So it almost feels like you've got redundancy there to some degree in terms of the dual scrubber.
Oh, that is interesting. Yeah. I want to try it out first if I like it. And because to be honest, if I see the unit, I think it's a bit strange looking. Yes. But everybody is like really happy with it. So it must be like a good unit, I think. Yeah.
I do agree with that, especially if you've tried good units like a Liberty. And look, there's other great units out there. They all have their pluses and minuses. I know Toddy's been working really hard on the T-Reb as well, which will be another fantastic side mount unit. The Liberty, there's some very good divers. Bogarts was diving it before he stopped, and there's Jill Heineth's diving it, or Becky Cavenshot's diving it. So there's some very good divers diving that unit as well, and I'm sure it's fantastic. I just haven't tried it. But again, the Sidewinder, Michael Thomas is using it, Audrey's using it, Patrick Woodman, Ed, goes on, and everyone is just stunned with how good it is. So worth checking out.
Yeah, Patrick is doing some serious exploration with the Sidewinder, I think. He pushes it to the limit, I think, Yeah,
I don't know about to the limit yet in terms of Patrick, because especially once you move on to the needle valve with it, it basically can be dived extremely deep as well if you need to do that. But Patrick's definitely committed heavily to it and is now running courses on it himself as well as a Sidewinder instructor. And I know he's taking on his exploration projects too. So for sure, he's pushing that unit and diving it and has become a complete convert. I think he was quite opposed to the unit until he got a good look at it and started to dive it.
Yeah, you were asking me something about the rigs, and maybe I forgot to mention, because when I started Sidemount, I started with a Stealth 2.0 Classic, which I dived actually was falling from my body, but it was a real good system. Then I tried different side mount rigs like the Red Hat Tusk, the Freedom, the Razor, the old one, that was a 2.0, I think, and now it's already a 3 or something, or 2.5, what is it now? But it was the old system with the blocks, the 2.0, and then I tried different kind of side mount systems, also the Hollis, not the Katana, but the 75. Like if I compare all of them, my choice is still the Stealth, actually. The new Razor might be a good rig as well, but I don't know. But as far as side mount rigs concerned, my choice is still the XD Stealth 2.0 tech, actually. That was your question, actually. I forgot to answer that.
Yeah, it was a little bit. And listen, I mean, you and I, we're both XD converts, and I've been diving at exactly the same time as you. Like you, I started on the Classic and then moved to the Tech, and I love it. There's other great units out there, no question. And I think for anyone who's looking at a unit, then we would strongly recommend XD. But you want to look at the environments you're diving as well. Some of the others are good in specific environments, and try them out and see which one's best for you. Both David and I dive and recommend XD, so there you go. I think I like to do it that way. I like to recommend what I dive. I don't tend to focus too much on other stuff unless I want to change something. All right, my friend, we have done really, really well, and it's been a pleasure meeting you, learning more about your diving here, especially about the mine diving in Belgium. That was something that was new to me, and so that's really interesting about the caves of France, around the way that you're diving side mount and teaching cave diving. Thank you for sharing. I'm sure we all got a lot out of that, and I hope we can catch up and dive Cave del Agua or somewhere similar sometime.
Yeah, we have to do that. Or you come to Belgium and we do some mines if you like, eh?
It's going to cost you some Belgian beer, no question.
No problem. We have our own cellar. We have actually our own beer.
Oh, you do? You do?
Beer. Yeah.
That's awesome. I love that. That's a culturally great thing to have. And listen, mate, I hope you stay well, and I hope you're not locked down too tight over the coming weeks, and let's hope everything with COVID-19 passes us quickly and that we can all move on to traveling and back to diving the world as we love to do.
Yeah, because I can't dive anymore. Like everything is locked down over here. Everything. All the quarries are closed. The mines who are locked, we cannot dive because of the virus. We can still do some caves because there is no lock on them. We can still go do that. But yeah, that's the only thing I can do. So that's what I'm going to do.
Yeah, good for you, mate. All the best, and I hope we'll catch up again soon.
Okay, we will. Oh, thanks for having me, Steve.
Well, I hope you enjoyed this episode as much as I did making it. It was awesome to catch up with David and learn more about Belgium. I especially enjoyed learning about the mines and about some of the places that he's been throughout Europe, including both of our favourites, Cava del Agua in Spain. Now, just one more note to finish this episode. Again, if you'd like to become a patron of Speaking Sidemount and support the show, then please go to www.patreon.com/speakingsidemount and check out what we've got to offer there. There's tons of great bonus content. It's only a few dollars a month. And in doing that, you can support this podcast and help make everything we're doing here possible. Thanks again, and I'll catch you in the next episode. You've been listening to Speaking Sidemount from www.sidemountpros.com. If you like the podcast, please subscribe and consider leaving us a 5-star review. If there's something you'd like us to cover on the show, then let us know via our Facebook page listed in the podcast notes. Thanks again, and we look forward to you joining us on our next episode of Speaking Sidemount.